Hi, it's Sarah here from the Flourishing Body Formula. Today's question, do you have any idea what you're eating? So I expect your answer to be quite clear, but what's in what you're eating? The reason I asked this question is I had a long conversation with a client this week. We were talking about coffee. So is coffee good to drink? A lot of beneficial chemicals in the coffee bean. So it really depends on your body type, what's happening in your life as to whether coffee is good for you or not. But we then got into the conversation of what kind of coffee was she drinking. And primarily she was drinking a coffee powder, coffee granules. So there's a huge difference between the processed, freeze-dried, coffee flavoured chemical stuff that comes in a jar versus the coffee bean. So my advice to her is to minimize those chemicals she's taking in her body. But if she wants to actually drink proper coffee, find a good coffee, then the conversation is, what's a good coffee? There are so many things in foods today that are confusing and not really black or white. So let me just share with you a couple of ideas from my training program. So what is food? We're so used to seeing nutrition labeling on food, it actually distracts us a little bit from understanding what really is in the product, because we're intent on trying to find protein, carbs, fat, sugar, salt, fiber. So lots of complicated information, a lot of analysis that you have to do when you're looking at products to find out whether there's any nutrition in the product. So my journey to good health has been about 7 years, and I used to spend time analysing these labels. I've simplified things for myself these days. I try to move away from eating processed foods, which means that what I'm eating, I know has got some kind of benefit, as 80% of what goes in my body comes from nature, comes from the ground. So yes, we can talk about whether something has been sprayed chemically or not, but actually the food that I put in my body doesn't have a label on it. It doesn't need to be analysed, because the benefit of it is primarily good. We are so used to now convenience and going for taste and texture rather than actual nutrient content that we've stopped looking for what actually is good for our body. So if I go back to the original question, so do you know what you're putting in your mouth? Well, there are some essential questions to ask, and rather than making this too heavy and complicated, just be aware that when something's processed, the food manufacturers are really looking for shelf life and for taste and for addiction. So they have special labs that are looking for the bliss point of food, which means that they are combining sugars, salts and fats to make the food so addictive for you that you're spending more on it. Processed foods aren't really food. There's nothing alive in processed foods. And whilst they're convenient and sometimes we need them or they're enjoyable to have, I no longer use processed foods as being a large part of my diet. It's something that you may want to look into. There's another question. So has it been genetically modified? Because our human genes are unique to ourselves, but when we consume food that's been modified, it starts to affect our own DNA. Modifications of how we should function, how we interact, how our neurons, how our hormones work, can all be upset and affected by genetically modified food. And the majority of the staples are now genetically modified. Grains, corn, a lot of well, actually, a lot of vegetables, conventional vegetables, because the food companies aren't able to make money and profit from things that are grown in nature. So they have to modify them slightly to be able to sell them as produce. So there's genetic modification in most conventional foods. So another question is, has it been grown with chemicals, pesticides, herbicides sprayed on it? And the majority of conventional fruit and veg has, as well as grains, oats, wheat. These products tend to be dried in the field with a chemical spray. So rather than leaving them for an extra week, it's much more convenient to spray them or to crop them early when they're not quite ripe, rather than being sun-dried, and then to spray them with chemicals to be able to dry them. So those chemicals go into our body, disrupt our hormones, affect us neurologically. So a good reason to try to look for organic produce. Another question is, what effect will it have in my body once I've eaten it? So is it alkaline to my body, meaning it's going to keep me in homeostasis, keep me in balance, or is it acidic? And all the things that are really tasty are acidic. So sweet things laden with sugar all turn to acid, which means our body has to produce more acid in the stomach to break it down. Meat, dairy, processed foods, these are all acidic foods. The alkaline foods, the foods that our body is best to function on, are natural fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. So what we're eating being fed on? It's not just what do we feed ourselves, but if we eat animal products, what has that animal been fed? And primarily animals are fed grains to fatten them up, and often are injected with antibiotics to get rid of diseases. So when they're in very unnatural environments, living in close proximity to themselves, they can get diseases. So antibiotics that are given to the animals come into our blood system, into our digestion system through the food that we're eating. So are you interested enough to try and avoid taking those things in your body? If you are, you probably want to be looking for a more organic kind of meat. And fish don't fare much better because farmed fish, farmed salmon, for instance, tend to be fed with grains and can concoct diseases and lice, etc. So are fed with antibiotics too, which often we don't know we're taking into our system. None of these things are visible to us, so we don't know when we're looking at something what's beyond it. An organic apple compared to a non-organic apple, there's a price difference. The price difference really is the value difference in the nutrition that your body's going to get, because the apple tree growing in an organic orchard is taking all the nutrients from the soil. So the apple that you get from that tree is going to be far more beneficial to the body versus one that's growing in an environment that uses a lot of chemicals. And why does it actually matter? Well, fascinatingly, we have 40 trillion cells or more in our body, and every cell has a cell receptor. It's not a cell receptor, it's a number of cell receptors. So on all cells are a lock and key system, which allows certain things to come into the cell. So if something's going to be effective for the body, it needs to be let into the cell. And if you're eating things that the body recognizes that are natural within our diet, it's like a key into the lock, and the cell allows it in. So limonene or vitamin C or amino acids that are natural will be very, very beneficial to the body. When you're taking in something that's genetically modified or has toxins on it, the cell won't let it in. So it's floating around in the body, but it's not able to get into the cell. So what actually happens, the immune system kicks in and attacks it. So if you're eating a lot of things that are on this slide here, you tend to be, it could be an underlying reason for some health illness that you have, particularly autoimmune diseases. Because if your immune system is constantly having to fight against toxins in the body that it doesn't recognize, it's getting exhausted. So it's not actually able to do the job that it's inclined to do, or it's designed to do. So it is really important. We don't have much education around this, but your cell receptors are an important part of your body functioning properly. And when your body starts to break down, as it does with a lot of my clients, it's primarily because of the things that they're eating. It's amazing that the body can respond and heal itself within a very short space of time. So then there's a question around, does the food that you're eating have its natural digestive enzymes intact? So really talking about dairy here. So milk, raw milk, comes with digestive enzymes. So this is the natural enzymes that are required to digest the protein, and casein particularly in milk. So when we pasteurize things, we're heating the product to a certain level that kills all the natural enzyme protecting benefits. So effectively, in milk, the thing that would have made it digestible to us has been taken out, which means for a lot of people, it's not particularly digestible. So people that can't eat normal dairy can sometimes eat raw dairy. And you can get milk, cheese, yogurts, all produced from raw milk, which have a protective and a probiotic benefit to the body. And then the last question, and this reverts back to where we started on the subject of coffee, is could the product be mould forming? So there are certain berries, beans that can create a mould. A mould is very toxic for the body. So where things are left around, maybe in sacks to be shipped around the world, they can get damp with the sea air, etc., or they can just naturally create mould. And there's something called mycotoxin in coffee. So a lot of coffee actually has mould. So when it has mould forming within it, which is not beneficial to the body. So when you're looking for a good coffee, you're looking for a coffee that is mycotoxin free, but is also minimally processed, not genetically modified, and not sprayed with chemicals. So it really narrows down the search. There's a huge difference in the taste of coffee and the benefit of coffee to the body when you're choosing something that is free of all of those artificial things versus mainstream coffee, which you'll get in most coffee shops on the high street, in all supermarkets, and particularly that coffee that's freeze-dried and comes to you in granules in a pot. So there's a lot to take in there, but the advice really is to be aware when you make your own choices about what you want to put in your body. It becomes much easier because you know what you're looking for. And actually you're eliminating probably 80% of what's in the marketplace. I shop primarily online with an organic fruit and veg delivery service, which means I'm not queuing in high streets along roads with masks and in a crowd of people. Things come directly to my door. I don't have all the temptation of, buy one, get one free, 3 for 2, all of those things that are used to make us buy things that aren't particularly good for us. Doesn't mean my life isn't fun and exciting. It means that I have more choice and my body is much happier with the choices that I'm making. I hope that's helpful.